My name is Ivar. I engrave these runes into stone and wood so as to better tell my story, and warn those who wander too far, alone in the woods. My village is in the north of the world. Even autumns can see a large amount of snowfall. And this autumn in particular was one where my little sister disappeared. And I found her, but now I myself am gone. I was working the fields to grind the beeswax for the hives that downsized for the winter, cold biting my fingers as I worked the stone and pestle, already imagining the summer mead for next year, the beeswax flaking against the stone, looking similar to the snowflakes already falling down. My sister, Ingva, walked up to me, fully covered, as she asked, "Brother, I wanted to get the last of the lingonberries before the frost takes them." I looked at the part of the woods where the lingonberries would be. Days were growing shorter, light dimmer, especially with an overcast sky as it was that day. I knelt down and put my hand on her shoulder, smiling as soft as the snow coming down as I said, "Yes, but hurry, it grows dark. You know what Mother has said about revenants." Ingva gasped and nodded as she said, I haven't forgotten," as she rushed off. I smiled and stood up, but for some reason, a sense of dread filled me as she ran towards the woods. Ingva is a small girl with long, dirty blonde hair, and even legends aside, there's other things in the woods. Wolves and bears who would very much enjoy a feast before winter. But I believed the lingonberry bushes to not be that far. She would likely hurriedly gather them and be on her way back before anything might even catch her scent. How mistaken I was. I sealed the last of the beeswax into its stone containers to congeal for later spreading. A friend of mine, Sven, arrived smiling as we greeted each other, speaking for what only felt like minutes, speaking on as we would join the summer voyages and what new lands we would see, laughing as we soon concluded our conversation as the sun was beginning to set. He departed, and Ingva had not yet returned. I turned my attention towards the woods. I did not even see her coming out of them. I began to worry, but I tried to assuage myself. She had this tendency to get lost in berry picking and likely had gotten lost trying to stuff her basket nearly to bursting as she always did. Father called us in from the homestead as I called back that I would fetch Ingva. I jogged up towards the woods, still hopeful in the belief that she had simply gotten too invested in her berry picking. I called out, "Ingva? Ingva!" as I approached the woods, following her still fresh footprints in the freshly falling snow. Snow that was still flaking as the sun was setting. I truly hadn't realized how much time had passed since Ingva had gone to gather berries. More snow had been piling up as I reached the area of the woods which would have the lingonberry bushes, even a few mushrooms growing where we would often bury the chicken, pig, and duck bones from the summer. Mushrooms that had gone untouched. Now I was starting to worry. Ingva would still do her due diligence in picking mushrooms along with berries, which is often why her basket was so full to bursting. I called out once again, "Ingva? Ingva!" as my slight speed walk had begun into a jog as I followed her footsteps, which had now taken on an odd pattern. What's more, I came finally to the lingonberry bushes. Some now scattered about the ground, some stomped into the snow, which concerned me, as at first I thought the smear of their red color was blood. But it might as well have been, as I saw her basket, half full with berries, and feet prints where she once stood. My heart beat rapidly. I was hoping so much that she, like many children her age, had taken up a penchant for playing games. I called out, "Ingva! Ingva!" I called out, my breath starting to fog the cold air. No response but the quiet of the woods. "Oh no," I said under my breath. I looked at the footprints to see where they might have gone next. What I saw wasn't human tracks. Rather, 8 spots around Ingva's clear boot prints. The prints were from an animal I couldn't recognize, but it seemed like pig tracks. The rabbit fur from her boots scattered amongst the snow. It confused me, but I couldn't just stand there or waste time. Whoever or whatever took Ingva couldn't be far. I could see more tracks leading away from her basket. I called out once again, my heart beginning to race. I made my way through the woods. As the sun was setting, the overcast skies darkening my path, I had to light a torch. I broke a branch from a nearby tree, pulling some pitch from my bag and wrapping it, lighting it with my knife and steel. Holding the torch aloft, the woods quiet save for the sounds of a few evening birds, that being crows and owls. I walked forward as the woods grew darker, and darker still, until even the sounds of owls were gone. My drive to find Ingva had made me almost deaf to any sounds around me. Not even the sounds of owls were present, only the sounds of my footsteps and the crackling of my torch. I soon realized, as I looked about, it was now so dark I could only see a few trees in front of me, and a few trees behind me and to my sides. The woods had somehow taken on a character of such incomprehensible darkness that I could not see beyond them. My heart truly began racing as I felt something had gone terribly, horribly wrong. I called out once more, "Ingva! Ingva!" as my voice bounced through the wood. Soon, I heard the sound of another set of crunching footsteps. I kept a grip on my knife. I was wondering if I was prey to some deception by the trickster god Loki. My heart racing as the steps grew closer and closer still, until walking in front of me was an old man. He had a blindfold on and was using a longbow for a walking stick. He walked with purpose. Not how most blind men walked. He walked straight towards me. His voice was that of straw against wood as he said, "Beware the woods, young man. To find what you seek, do not trust your eyes." As he continued walking about in the direction he was, walking past me as I turned with a, "Hold! Who are you?" But as soon as I turned, he was gone. I turned back to the crushing cold darkness and proceeded further in. As I moved deeper into the woods, I heard the sounds of scraping amongst the trees, as if knives were dancing among the branches. I looked up with my torch to see thick, intense webbing, like that of a spider, all along the leaves. Amazingly, despite this darkness, the tracks of whatever took Ingva were still present, once again in sets of 4. Leading eventually to a burrow in the ground. I believe the darkness in the woods that night was intense, but there was almost nothing but a void inside that burrow. But I heard movement and shuffling inside. I knew I had to enter. My heart was racing. I felt it was going to pound out of my chest as I entered this burrow. I had traveled these woods many times as a boy and even throughout the summer, but I had never seen anything like this. But as my mind raced, I began to think of how there had been a few disappearances throughout the years, of our elderly, and even a few children. As my torch penetrated the darkness, I could see the same webbing wrapping the sides of the cave like a cocoon. Once again, that sound of knives against leaves type of rustling I could hear. I could hear a faint squeak of a gasp, one I knew all too well. Ingva. I wanted to call for her, but now that I had an idea of what kind of creature or creatures I was dealing with, I know I could not speak her name aloud. Not until I was sure she was safe. I continued trepidatiously, drawing my knife now for whatever might come. I carried on through the passages of the burrow, watching my feet for any webbing on the ground. Whatever kind of creature was in here, I didn't want to get trapped by it. My flame illuminating the sides of the burrow, until it diverged in path. I couldn't hear anything. My torch still only lighting the small amount around me, and needing more fuel. I would light these webs aflame and burn whatever this creature was. Lighting my way to Ingva, but it would risk burning her too, so it would have to wait. However, I did mark my path with a bit more pitch, taking some webbing off the wall and wrapping it around my torch for fuel. Continuing down the path to the right. The path to the right, the further I went in, the more foul the smell. Like the smell of an infected wound. My torch still lighting my way, until I stepped in some kind of wet, cold substance. I looked down to see my boot covered in a greenish ooze. I heard a groan. Further in, as I held my torch up, I heard someone call my name, a voice I faintly recognized. It called again. As I held the torch up to reveal a desiccated husk of something that was once human, I turned my torch to reveal more of these, covered in webbing, the ooze dripping from their eye sockets. I covered my mouth as the smell now intensified, as smells often do when you come to their source. I could barely breathe. I stepped back slowly, as much as these things that were likely villagers I once knew called for me. I steadfastly ignored them. Despite the desire in my heart to help them, I pressed on, back in the other direction, their voices drowning out in the vast, murky darkness. I came back to the fork in the path, knowing this was the only way forward. I heard skittering back towards the exit. Whatever this creature was gone for now. It would likely return. Taking more webbing from my torch, I pressed forward, adrenaline forcing my pace into a jog. The burrow as cold as it was foreboding. Eventually, I heard a muffled grunting of Ingva, and I could see light through a small crevice in the ceiling. As my torch illuminated more of the burrow, I could see Ingva struggling in the webbing as her eyes widened at my approach. I quickly rushed to her, using my knife to cut her down from the webbing. I cut her mouth free as I whispered, "Hold still." After she was free, she whispered, "Brother, that thing is coming back. You shouldn't have come." I told her, "There's no way I'm leaving you here." I looked about at the opening in the burrow. I said, "Do you think you could fit through there? You're getting out of here first." As she said, "But what about you?" I said, "Just go get Father and the village, try to get them back here. Hurry!" As I quickly hoisted her to the opening, her hands working at the brush and rocks that were blocking an exit, the skittering was heard as she gasped with a, "It's coming," as I gave her one more push with a, "Go!" As she yelled, "I'll come back for you," as she rushed off. I drew my knife and readied myself for this horror. The skittering came to a slow, as I heard a groaning hiss of a voice that said, You took my meal, but you'll do far more meat. As stepping into the light of the burrow was a spider, but on the middle of the body was the torso and head of a man. His hair gray and gangled, his skin pale. Protruding were several jutting pieces of spider carapace. Where human eyes would be, were 8 spider eyes that blinked at me. Protruding from his teeth were large fangs dripping with poison. I held up my torch, nearly frozen with fear, as I said, "Stay back!" Waving my torch at this creature. It hissed and swatted at the torch, attempting to knock it out of my hand. I moved around the chamber, swinging my torch rapidly, attempting to be unpredictable as it hissed more. I remembered suddenly that the way back was a straight shot out of the burrow. I held the torch out to the webbing as the creature looked at the torch with a hiss, its eyes furrowing at me as I said, "Let me go. Never return, or I drop it." Even it seemed to know that if I were to drop the torch, his entire burrow would burn into nothing. It growled and hissed, saying, "These are my woods, and you are now my meal." As it raised its spider body and grasped some rocks protruding from the ceiling, the rocks tumbling down and breaking the floor of the burrow. I had no idea the floor was hollow. I tumbled down a dark chasm, my torch being the only thing to guide me. I made my way to another chamber deep inside, the darkness nearly suffocating. The fall, I realized, I cut my leg, and I'm still bleeding heavily. I don't know if I'll be found, but I've been sitting lost in this darkness for what feels like an hour. But anyone who reads this, beware the woods alone. I think I hear it coming.